Hello, good morning to all of you. Today's presentation on comparative literature studies, and me and Aarti Sarvaiya, we are going to deal with the article of Why Comparative Indian Literature by Sisir Kumar Das. So, the comparative literature is a historical approach itself, is a world literature inserting Indian into comparative literature. This research investigates the role of comparative Indian literature in fostering a deeper understanding of historical and contemporary issues within the Indian subcontinent. Comparative Indian literature becomes a powerful tool for engaging with complex societal challenges and promoting inclusive narratives that reflect the plurality of Indian experience. Comparative Indian literature is the field of study that involves examining and comparing literary works from diverse linguistic, regional, and cultural traditions within India. So, these are the key arguments. So, Sisir Kumar is a pioneer in the comparative literature movement in India, and he lectured in various countries of Europe, including Spain, Greece, as well as in Japan, etc. He was serving president of the Comparative Literature Associations of India till his death. His two-volume History of Indian Literature, covering the period from 18th 1956, published by Sahitya Akademi in 1991 and 1995 respectively, is considered a path-breaking work, being the first ever attempt to write and integrate history of literatures produced in various Indian languages. Various schools of comparative literature. Comparative literature came into the practice in the field of academia. Comparative literature means world literature. It breaks the idea of national literature. German schools. Johann Gottfried von Herder compiled on the influence of poetry on the customs of people, which collected the folk songs from other ethnic groups, including German, British, Spanish, French, Italian, and Greek, was the first anthology of world literature. German people focused on thematology. French schools did influence study, and French scholars have made significant contributions to literary theory and comparative literature, like structuralism and post-structuralism, which emerged from French intellectual traditions, have had a profound impact on literary studies. French schools gave so much importance to what happened with the author and who influenced. Earlier started as influence study, but later on they modified it, named as reception study. American schools of comparative literature. Comparative literature has its own connecting with everything around it. American schools of comparative literature makes it interdisciplinary, and Henry remarks focus on the concept of process, and French schools focus on product. American scholars have played a crucial role in shaping the field of comparative literature, particularly through interdisciplinary approaches and a focus on the diverse literary traditions. British schools. Matthew Arnold's touchstone method is comparative method of criticism. S.S. Prever was an Irish writer. He put the of idea of placing India in comparative literature. All Indian literatures came closer through the struggle for freedom, and the search for a new idea is also the search for a national identity and through literature. Tagore's Vishwa Sahitya in his address in 1907, David Nemroj has brought about demands revisiting the concept of world literature after seeing Tagore's and Vishwa Manav. It's all the work of Indian literature. Can we say that comparative literature gives us a framework which we are lacking? Western disciplines blends everything, where in India within the nation there are many things which needs to explore. The idea of an Indian literature is convinced by Sri Aurobindo and others has failed to provide us with a critical framework to study Indian literatures together, except in viewing Indian literatures as expressions of a common heritage. A critical framework study of Indian literature is not only about unity or common elements, but rather it is a linguistic identity and plurality. Sisir Kumar Das was aware about ignoring plurality. Uh, the quote is necessary to study Indian literary relations within a comparative framework, and the idea of Indian literature and comparative Indian literature have multilingualism and cultural diversity. Both are quite significant, and intersections between human and technology, and technology and human. Now, I would like to call Aarti Sarvaiya for further presentation.
Hello everyone, I am Aarti Sarvaiya. In this presentation, I am going to deal with later part of this essay. So, why comparative Indian literature? Sisir Kumar Das is mentioned that why comparative Indian literature is there. So, if we see historically, the Western discourse. If we see historically, then the Western literature is mainly focuses on the Western writers is mainly focuses on the national different nations literature and different national literature, and Western writers also influenced by Western writers were mainly influenced by the Indian languages and cultures. For example, the writer Gatte, who is mostly influenced by the Sanskrit language, and he is most influenced by by the work of Kalidas, the Abhignan Shakuntala. In uh, by this essay, he is by this essay, C. Kumar Das uh, aims to tell that national and national national writers are nationality of Western writers are having some boundaries between some boundaries, like they are only things about their Western literature, and they are following some boundaries, and this by national and global things, he addresses he talks that parochial word for the narrow-mindedness of Western writers. In India we are having different cultures, different religion, different languages. So we are having different languages and culture in one nation. So we are multilingual, and we are having a cultural diversity. The idea of an Indian literature emphasizes the underlying unity of themes and forms and attitude among the various literatures produced in different Indian languages during the last 3,000 years or so. This is partly a manifestation of Indian intellectuals and anxiousness to discover the essential thread of unity in our multilingual and multi-religious culture. We are having a multi-religion and multi-linguist, and so uh, we are having some cultural discourse also. There are two groups of scholars. One is talking about comparative literature, and another is talking about the comparative Indian literature. The, in the another group of scholar is talking about comparative Indian literature, obviously to add a new dimension to our literary studies, and probably to create a framework within which the relation between various Indian literature can be worked out. The word comparative, however, has created some confusion, and one wonders whether it is being used in lend some respectability to study Indian languages by linking it up with comparative literature. Still, a Western discipline, or indeed, or indicate a proper framework within which Indian literature can be studied. In through the comparative literature is studies studies without any boundaries, uh, and through in India we are having different nation and different languages, so we are having a different culture, different national languages, and in comparative study we are though we are having a different nation and different languages, we are uh, so the comparative study is going between two languages and two nations. The term comparative Indian literature, like comparative literature, is not self-explanatory, and it is necessary not only to define the term Indian literature, but also define the necessity of the qualifier. Comparative literature emerged as a new discipline to counteract the notion of autonomy of national literature. Its ultimate goal, though it is doubtful whether that can ever be archived, it to visualize the total literary activities of a man in single universe. Concept of world literature. The concept of literature is coined by Goethe, a poet who attempted to bring together the literature of different civilization. Was also the first man in the history to speak about world literature. By world literature, he means the memorable works in all languages of the world, rather than assembling all the literatures. A comparist is hardly in position to exercise any aesthetic judgment uh, in choosing the best work in all languages of the world. His goal too is world literature, not in the sense of Goethe and Ravindranath has used it, but in the sense of all literary traditions. The comparatist knows that comparative literature is a method of investigation, while world literature, as Goethe, means that it is a body of valuable works. In a comparative study, we are having some questions in our mind, and we are go through the questions. So it is a investigatory process. One can argue that comparative Western literature is a study of different national literature, while in comparative Indian literature is a study of one nation, or according to some, it is a study of national literature written in many languages. Um, in comparative study in comparative study, different nations literature as are having, and in comparative Indian literature, different different language many languages, or national literature is being introduced. Literature deals with the concrete, not with abstraction. It is born language, and yet it goes beyond the language. It is nourished by culture. its meaning and significance comes out of its relation with that culture. Multilingualism is the fact of Indian society and Indian literature. And sometimes Indian writers are merge two languages in one literature. So, or for that they give this word Manipravala for two different languages which give born to a different or a new language. For example, the Midnight Children by Salman Rushdie, in which Salman Rushdie had used two languages like English and Hindi, and we are getting the new language is English. In Amya Dev's article, she analyzed in Amya Dev's article, she analyzed the Westernization and Indianization as a complementary process. Is worth recalling here. What I mean is that the Indianization was perhaps more than a mere reaction to the world to to the Westernization. The two were complementary. So, what we are concerned with here is a literature that, as the contextualist would say, is causally bound to be westernized and Indianized at the same time. One would not say that there is a Indianization in writer like Mubak or a Kalki along with westernization. It is a more conscious return to one's own past, but not aggressively, but more consciously, and also observing the new and in a creative synthesis. A Western right through this, she tries to say that Western writers are having their past in Western, or they are writing about Indians that they are bring something from their past, but they cannot called the westernized writers. In another article, Armia Dev gives arguments that comparison is a right reason for us because one, we are multilingual, and two, we are third world. Um, we are multilingual. Indian people are multilingual because we are having multiple languages and cultures in one nation, and other is we are we are third world because we are having some restriction, psychological restriction in our nation. These are the references. Thank you. Now you can ask me a question.
Come here and ask. Who is asking? Mansi. Mansi.
Various schools of
Not you. Don't do.
Anjali, my question is, what is a characteristic feature of American comparative literature in term of interdisciplinary approaches?
the various schools of comparative Indian literature, in which American scholars who was integrate with literature, and its interdisciplinary approach, such as cultural studies and history.
Aarti, what is the importance of comparative study in the Indian literature today?
In today's life, comparative study is important because through the comparative study we are getting the idea of different culture and different cultural identity and nation's identity together. Thank you.